Hello everyone. In this video, I wanted to take on the challenge of ranking the top 12 DCI shows of all time, and I wanted to make it as scientific as I possibly could. But then I started to think, drum corps is an art form, art of subjective, and since we know that the scores are all made up and let's face it, they don't really matter, but I wanted to come to the table with at least some sort of a framework. So I devised a rubric of 3 core pillars. Pillar number 1. Transcendence. Ever so often, we'll see a show that enters the scene that seems to have flipped the activity on its head. A show that equally embodies the activity up to that point while simultaneously feeling like it belongs in a different era entirely. Pillar number 2. The show must embody the competitive spirit. No, it doesn't have to have a perfect score, although the ones that I select, they do tend to have higher scores, but that doesn't matter. When the members of a corps are fighting for perfection, the audience can feel it. It comes through their performance. It comes through to the audience. It is something that you can feel. Pillar number 3, the show must remain timeless. This helps me control for recency bias, but it's a show that has survived the test of time. A show that can be seen by any drum corps fan of any generation and continue to be loved and a part of the modern conversation. So without any further ado, enjoy the video. Number 12, The Cadets, 2011, Between Angels and Demons. To understand why this show belongs in the conversation of the all-time greats, we need to understand who the Cadets were at their core. Founded in 1934 as the Holy Name Cadets by a Catholic parish in Garfield, New Jersey, this organization had one of the richest and longest-running histories in all of drum corps. In 2011, they were the second oldest continuously operating corps in the activity. But more importantly, their roots are in the Catholic youth activity, moral instruction, religion, character building through music. So when it came time to stage a literal battle between good and evil on the football field, there was perhaps no corps better suited to take on this concept. They were the only one who could do it their way. This was a corps with 77 years of moral and spiritual foundation, bringing that identity to this competitive show. Between Angels and Demons arrived in drum corps history when shows were becoming conceptually convoluted. Ooh, listen to these horns rip real quick. Designers were prioritizing complexity over clarity. Audiences were often left confused about what they had just witnessed. The Cadets, they took the opposite approach. As drill designer Jeff Sacktick explained, quote, "It was an easy concept, one that everyone could understand," end quote. Cream uniformed angels led by a graceful figure with wings entered from one tunnel. Maroon-clad demons violently crawled from the opposite side, hurling a baritone through the air. And yes, that baritone did get run over by a bus earlier in the season, fun fact. The visual storytelling was immediate, and it was universal. You didn't need program notes. You didn't need an explanation. Good versus evil, light versus darkness, order versus chaos. But here's what makes it transcend. The show proved that accessibility doesn't mean simplicity in execution. The drill was complex, and it was demanding. The musical selections were sophisticated. Frank Ticelli's Angels in the Architecture was commissioned specifically to explore the conflict between divine and evil forces. Hans Zimmer's 160 beats per minute from the film Angels and Demons. The closer featured the doxology from a 1551 Swiss hymnal. Fun fact, this was the first and only time that the Cadets performed doxology. This balance between conceptual clarity, technical sophistication, and spiritual ties became a template. shows after 2011 realized that they could tell powerful stories without sacrificing accessibility. And that's transcendence. Does it embody the winning spirit? The 2011 season tells the story. The Cadets finished 4th at the very first competition in June that year. They trailed Carolina Crown, the Cavaliers, and of course, the Blue Devils. But by August, they had won every single show in finals week. That progression demonstrated the championship mentality. The Blue Devils were attempting a rare three-peat, having won in 2009 and 2010. The competitive stakes were enormous, and the Cadets showed up every night with relentless intensity. During performances, the characterizations never broke. Angels remained orderly and graceful, and demons remained chaotic and violent. That commitment to the concept under pressure of competition is what the winning spirit looks like. In finals, the Cadets scored 98.35, defeating the Blue Devils. They swept visual effect, visual performance, and music ensemble. The night before finals, they scored perfect 10s and 3 subcaptions. This was their 10th DCI World Championship, but the competitive fire goes deeper than the scores. Throughout the show, whenever the two factions intermingled, the Angels versus Demons narrative paused, and the corps performed straight-ahead, traditional drum corps. This wasn't a gimmick. This was a design choice that honored the competitive nature of the activity while serving the theatrical concept. It showed respect for what drum corps has always been, while pushing towards into what it could become. So is it timeless? 14 years later, Between Angels and Demons remains a reference point in drum corps conversations. But timelessness isn't just about being remembered, it's about continued relevance. The show's impact came from how the audience responded emotionally. That resonance goes beyond the moment. The show tapped into something universal and eternal about human nature, the struggle between our better and our worse, the hope that goodness can prevail. These themes don't age. Good triumphs over evil. That resonance goes beyond the moment. From a technical standpoint, the show remains watchable and engaging. The drill holds up. The musical arrangements hold up. The pacing and build remain effective. Not every corps could have performed this show successfully. The Cadets' entire institutional identity was built on this morality, this good versus evil. This wasn't theater, it was a testimony. The maroon and cream uniforms splitting into Angels and Demons wasn't just a clear visual choice. It was the Cadets taking on their own identity and asking, what happens when tradition itself is divided? When the very foundations we stand on are tested? That authenticity made the difference between a show that's merely entertaining and a show that resonated on a deeper level. The Cadets brought 77 years of tradition, 10 previous world championships, and a legacy built on moral foundation to this production. Early in the season, the design team considered allowing the Demons to occasionally win, but something changed as the summer progressed. People began having profound emotional reactions. They needed the Angels to win. They needed to believe that light could overcome darkness. And so, the ending became fixed. Angels placed their hands on the Demons' shoulders, pushed them down, and raised their index finger into the heavens for that massive final chord. Number 11. The Cadets, 1984. West Side Story.
That's right, another cadets show. The cadets earned this distinction, not through reputation alone, but through fundamentally reshaping what was possible in this activity. The 1984 cadets changed everything. To understand the revolutionary nature of this production, you need to understand what drum corps looked like in 1983. Santa Clara Vanguard had experimented with asymmetrical drill in 1980. They finished 7th, which sent a clear message to the activity. Audience and judges weren't quite ready. Most corps retreated to safe, symmetrical designs. The cadets in 1984, they went the opposite direction. Drill designer George Zengali had joined the Corps' visual staff in 1982, bringing with him a completely different approach to marching formations. He studied water droplets. He played with the small chains that hold pins and bank teller counters, watching how they moved organically, fluidly, without regard for military precision or geometric symmetry. And he translated those movements onto drill paper. By 1983, he had introduced the famous Z-pull maneuver that became his signature. West Side Story in 1984 was where his concept of flex drill fully materialized. Abstract, amoeba-like forms gelled into one another, evolved in ways never seen before. Fans commented on wondering how the members could even march the show, much less execute it at such a high level of perfection. But the visual innovation was only part of the story. The cadets broke one of drum corps' most sacred traditions. They started with a ballad. Opening with Maria instead of a traditional loud fanfare was unheard of. The conventional wisdom said that you needed to grab the audience's attention immediately with power and volume. The cadets said you could grab the attention with a soloist and vulnerability. The 1984 season was not without struggles. During a show in Whitewater, Wisconsin, over a dozen members of the horn line fell during the Z-pull move at the end of the show. One member fell, backing up, and then another, and then another, and then another. This is, of course, famously referred to as the Whitewater Wipeout. Most corps would have been demoralized, but the cadets, they cleaned it. They fixed it, and they kept pushing forward. They came out of the gate with an 80.0 score and never really looked back. They won 35 of 39 shows during that summer, losing once each to Santa Clara Vanguard and the Blue Devils, and twice to the Phantom Regiment. But when it mattered, they delivered. In finals, they scored 98.0, a record for the time. They defeated Blue Devils by just 1/10 of a point. That margin of victory demonstrates the competitive intensity of the performance. They left nothing on the field. This was the cadets' second consecutive championship, part of what would become the first three-peat in modern DCI history, 83, 84, and 85. The arrangers Jim Prime and Thorne Hannum created a brass book that allowed the horn players to really cut loose. The percussion section exploded with color and complexity in what was still a relatively new concept of the stationary pit. And the visual execution, despite the difficulty of the asymmetric drill, was remarkably clean. But perhaps the most telling indicator was how the staff and members connected with this concept. One mellophone player explained, quote, "The instructors work hard to teach the corps how to take the audience to Broadway and experience a true performance," end quote. They weren't just marching drill and playing music. They were performing musical theater at the highest level of technical difficulty while moving at speeds that seemed impossible. How is it timeless? Well, years later, West Side Story 1984 remains a touchstone reference in drum corps conversations. The cadets themselves have returned to this material multiple times in 1994, 2009, each time bringing new treatments, but always acknowledging the foundational importance of the 1984 version. The musical arrangements still hold up. Jim Prime's version of Tonight is still considered one of the most remarkable productions ever put on a drum corps field. The arrangement of America remains a feel-good moment that translates across generations. But the timelessness goes deeper. This show proved that innovation could win championships. It proved that audiences and judges could be educated to appreciate new approaches. It proved that breaking tradition wasn't disrespectful, it was evolution. As drill design has continued to evolve, West Side Story 1984 remains the reference point. When designers push boundaries, they're walking in the path that the cadets cleared in 1984. When corps attempt difficult asymmetric foundations, they are building on foundations Zengali laid with this show. The surprise company front at the end has been studied, analyzed, and attempted by countless corps since. It's become one of those legendary moments that transcends the specific show, becomes part of the drum corps mythology. Even the failures of the show have become part of its legend. And here's what makes it transcend. This show ended with one of the most celebrated drill moves in drum corps history. Throughout the performance, Zengali's magic had pulled horns and drums together from different directions and formations. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, they appeared in a solid company front. This surprise company front became legendary. One judge who was on the field that night later said that this performance was his #1 personal favorite across his entire judging career. He described being caught between a magnificent brass line and a roaring crowd, calling it magical. The impact on the activity was immediate and permanent. As one member explained, people still talk about this show today because it was the year that the crowd and judges started to accept the eccentricities of George Zengali's visual programs. It was the show that started pushing the other corps to take risks and do something different. Just as Pete Emmons opened the doors with asymmetry with the Santa Clara Vanguard in 1980, Zengali sent drill riders off on an entirely new direction with his treatment of forms and evolutions. Every asymmetrical drill formation you see today traces its lineage back to this show. Indeed, West Side Story 1984 sits at number 11 not because it's less important than the shows that follow, but because it represents a specific type of greatness. It was the paradigm shift. Number 10. Madison Scouts, 1988. Malagueña. This is a show that proves you don't need conceptual complexity to transcend the era. Sometimes, excellence itself is the innovation. This production centers around Paul Hart's Concerto for Guitar and Jazz Orchestra and Bill Hallman's arrangement of Ernesto Lecuona's Malagueña. But to understand why this belongs on our list, we need to understand the context of 1988 and who the Madison Scouts were at that moment. Founded in 1938, the Madison Scouts are one of the oldest continuously operating drum corps in the activity. They won their first DCI championship in 1975. By the mid-1980s, they were consistently competitive, but had fallen from championship contention. In 1987, they placed 7th. The organization's board of directors was reportedly considering removing Corps director Scott Stewart for what they perceived as a wimpy approach to competition. Then came 1988, the Corps' 50th anniversary year, and nobody, least of all the members themselves, expected what would happen. How did they transcend the era? Here's what makes this show fascinating. It doesn't transcend through innovation, it transcends by representing the absolute pinnacle of what traditional drum corps could be. The 1980s were a transitional period. Corps like the Cadets were introducing asymmetrical drill and conceptual programming. Santa Clara Vanguard was experimenting with theatrical elements. The Blue Devils were refining technical precision. The activity was evolving rapidly toward what would become modern drum corps. The Madison Scouts went the opposite direction. They said, we're going to take everything that makes traditional drum corps great, higher, faster, louder, and execute it at such a high level that it becomes undeniable. The show opens with Left Bank from Hart's 1986 concerto, an unusual combination of classical guitar with a jazz orchestra. This piece brought sophistication to the opener without abandoning accessibility. The percussion mallet players laid down infectious riffs that pulsated throughout. The mood alternated between cheerful, jaunty passages and heavy jazz punctuation, keeping audiences wondering where the music would go next. Then came the ballad, a brief moment from the concerto that gave the horn players' lips and the audience's ears a moment of rest. As it concluded, the horns turned backfield and silence, and that's when it happened. The snare line began building a crescendo roll. The crowd started screaming in anticipation. They knew what was coming, and then the thermonuclear opening volley of Malagonia. Bill Holman's arrangement of this Spanish classic became the gold standard for higher, faster, louder drum corps. The brass players came to the front sideline to unleash full power during a standstill moment. Then, the 360-degree pivot with half of the horns turning left, half the horns turning right, all while marching in a circular foundation, brought them into a large block wedge. The show proved that innovation isn't always about changing the rules, sometimes it's about perfecting what already exists. In 1988, Corps realized they couldn't just be conceptually interesting, they had to deliver the fundamental excellence that Madison demonstrated. This show bridged eras by reminding the activity of its roots, while being performed so well that it influenced the future. As one fan described years later, quote, "It was pure magic, and the crowd just could feel what was fixing to happen." The Corps started with an undefeated short tour of Wisconsin and Illinois. Then, in June, they flew to Europe for 20 days as a part of their 50th anniversary celebration, touring in Germany, Holland, and England. They conducted clinics, performed exhibitions that included all active European corps. When they returned to the United States, they faced a harsh reality check. At the Midwest Championships, they placed 4th. They had been beaten by the Phantom Regiment, Cavaliers, Cadets, Blue Devils, and the Santa Clara Vanguard throughout the season. As euphonium player Brian Gregg later explained, quote, "We weren't thinking championship. We were hoping that we could just finish the season ahead of the Velvet Knights. There was no reason to think we would be the top 5, let alone contenders for the championship, end quote. They were considered a dark horse at best, but here's where the mysterious nature of the 1988 championships come into play. For the first and only time in DCI history, prelims scores were not announced. The judging lineup for finals was selected by random, and the performance order was determined by core directors literally drawing numbers out of a hat. Madison Scouts were shocked when they drew from the top 5. They pulled position 10, third to last, in front of the Vanguard and the Cadets. What nobody knew was that Madison Scouts was already ranked first coming out of prelims. Blue Devils had been undefeated in 26 shows that season. The Santa Clara Vanguard was attempting to break their streak of 4 consecutive second-place finishes, the only world-class corps to ever do so. The competitive pressure was enormous. Madison took the field for finals. They delivered what many consider one of the finest crowd-pleasing performances in drum corps history, in a format where nobody knew where they stood. They scored 97.1. They won their second DCI World Championship. Only 2 points separated the top 5 finalists. After the announcement, people told corps members, quote, "DCI finally got it right," end quote. There was a sense that maybe the activity would be going in a different direction, one that honored the crowd connection and the fundamental excellence alongside innovation. So yes, 37 years later, Madison Scouts 1988 remains the reference point for crowd-pleasing drum corps. The show represents something that every generation of drum corps fans can connect with, the pure joy of watching excellence unfold. '88 has become a part of drum corps mythology. The 50th anniversary celebration, the European tour, the come-from-behind victory, the mysterious finals format, the undefeated Blue Devils falling to third, all of it contributes to a narrative that transcends this specific show, becomes part of the activity's cultural fabric. Many of the Madison Scout veterans echo a similar sentiment. This show is what, quote, the crowd wanted, and that's why it belongs on this list. The show didn't change the activity's direction. The evolution toward modern drum corps continued, but it proved that traditional approaches executed with championship fire and absolute commitment could still compete at the highest level. Number 9, Carolina Crown, 2013. E equals MC squared. This is the show that proved that any corps, regardless of where they started, can reach the absolute pinnacle of this activity. Carolina Crown was founded in 1988 as the Charlotte Drum Corps Association, just a group of local drum corps fans who gathered on an irregular basis to talk about the activity, watch videos. They also started hosting drum corps shows but ran into financial struggles. They eventually met with Charlotte Parks and Recreation to get sponsorship for future shows. By 1989, they had a $1,000 gift from the Queen City Optimists to start a performance group. In 1990, fielding a corps of only 61 members, they competed in open class. They placed 33 out of 33 at the DCI World Championships in Buffalo, the lowest they could mathematically finish that year. But they didn't give up. They moved to Class A in 1991, placing second and earning DCI member status with a 25th place finish in open class. Then, in 1992, they placed third in Division II And in 1993, after only 4 years on the field, Carolina Crown won the Division II championship in Jackson, Mississippi. They moved up to Division I in 1994, finished 17th in semifinals. Then, in 1995, in only their 6th season ever, they made finals and placed 11th. And, except for 2002, they've been a finalist every year since, finishing within the top 5 every year from 2008 onward. But they had never won a world championship, and by 2013, they had built a reputation as the corps with the best brass in DCI, winning the Jim Ott Best Brass Performance Award in 2009, 2011, and 2012. And people were wondering when they would finally break through. The Einstein theme gave them that perfect vehicle to showcase everything they did well, and the show is broken into 4 movements: discovery, energy, obsession, mass, attraction, and speed. It opened with vocalists reciting an abstract poem from Philip Glass' avant-garde opera, Einstein on the Beach, repetitively counting numbers before the fanfare sailed in with Richard Strauss's Also sprach Zarathustra, the piece that became famous from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And throughout the production, there were visual Easter eggs everywhere. Einstein's equation, a moving sine wave, an exploding nuclear bomb, shimmering light rays reflecting off a droplet of water, a water molecule with protons in each hydrogen atom, and a rotating 3D prism that reflected Einstein's 1905 paper on light refraction. The energy section was powerful and radiant, based on Philip Glass's Knee 5 and Paul Lovett Cooper's Walking with Heroes, a brass band piece from the early 2000s. Yeah, I'm gonna let this movement play out because it's just too damn good. The closer, Speed, incorporated Lovett Cooper's The Light Fantastic, a brass band piece that encapsulated the grandeur of the Olympic Games, with color guard flags of different colors complementing the purple hue of the uniform pants. And the concept suggested achieving the speed of light, leading to that much talked about rotating 3D prism drill formation. The show concluded with the Corps' iconic crown drill formation taking a shape during a reprise of the narration. Everything must have an ending, except my love for you. And it was the greatest punches to the gut in drum corps history because you could feel that emotional weight of everything this organization had worked on for 23 years, culminating to this single moment. The 2013 season was intense, with Carolina Crown dominating with 24 wins during the summer, including 14 straight victories. They were in a tight race with the Blue Devils all season, who were defending 2012 champions, attempting to win back-to-back titles. Crown's percussion had been their Achilles heel throughout their history, and in 2013, they were trailing around 6th place, and that captioned most of the summer. In fact, they placed 7th in prelims, 4th in semifinals, and 6th in finals, averaging out to 5th place. But fortunately, the staff and members made the necessary adjustments to keep the corps competitive. In finals, Crown scored a 98.3, defeating the Blue Devils by just a quarter of a point, 98.05. And they swept music effect, visual analysis, brass, and music analysis. Music Effect earned straight firsts in both subcaptions from both judges, with one judge awarding the corps a perfect score, and the brass caption earned a perfect 20, the first and only perfect brass score in DCI Finals history to date. Despite the 20 in brass and 19.8 in music analysis, the 18.7 in percussion brought them down to third in total music, but it was just enough to edge out the Blue Devils, and they also took home Visual Performance Award. DCI hadn't named a first-time championship since Phantom Regiment in 1996, 17 years earlier. And through this victory, Carolina Crown became the first and only corps to win DCI World Championship titles in both the World Class and Open Class, having won a Division II in 1993, 20 years prior. They became only the 9th corps to win a World Class Championship, joining Kingsmen, Santa Clara Vanguard, Madison Scouts, Blue Devils, the Cadets, Star of Indiana, the Cavaliers, and the Phantom Regiment. Executive Director Jim Coates said, quote, "For Crown coming from Division II way back when, it's unbelievable. It shows that anyone can come from the last place we took our first year out. This season is not so much about the win, it's about the experience of excellence in teaching the kids." End quote. The drum majors that championship year led the corps through one of the most emotionally charged seasons in recent history, and the pressure of carrying that brass reputation while trying to shore up percussion performance created an intensity that showed in every performance.
Impossible, you say?
What makes this show transcend its era is how it elevated brass performance standards across the entire activity. After 2013, every corps had to level up their brass game because Crown had set a new bar, a perfect score. You couldn't just have a pretty good brass line anymore. You needed excellence. The show proved that accessible storytelling paired with championship-level execution could win at the highest level, and the Einstein theme made complex physics concepts emotionally engaging through visual metaphors that the audience could understand without needing advanced degrees. The balance between intellectual content and visceral impact became a template for future shows. That the path of greatness does not require decades of tradition or legacy status, it just requires commitment to excellence. The timelessness of this show comes from multiple directions. There's a judge's tape from prelims where the general effect music judge is literally crying during the performance.
It's really hard to talk when you're bawling like a baby.
And when a show makes the judges emotional, you have transcended scoring. You have created art. The musical arrangements still hold up, visual design still works, pacing and build remain effective. You can show this production to anyone, they would understand it, appreciate it, and, let's be honest, they would become downright fans of Carolina Crown. Crown returned to the purple uniform pants for the first time in 10 years, lovingly referred to as the Purple Pants Band. The show sits at number 9 because it represents the ultimate underdog story in modern drum corps history. A corps founded by fans, and 23 years after their founding stood on top of the activity with a perfect brass score and their first world-class championship. That is proof that anything is possible if you commit to the work, believe in your vision, and never give up on what you are building. Number 8, Bluecoats, 2014, Tilt. In 2011, the Bluecoats placed 7th. In 2012, 6th. 2013, 5th. They were climbing, and they were searching. They were searching for something, some identity, some concept that would push them into the elite tier permanently, rather than just occasionally visiting. They weren't an upstart trying to prove themselves. They were an established finalist core with decades of history, a near miss at greatness in 2010, and an undeniable upward trajectory, a burning desire to break through into championship contention, which meant they had everything to gain and nothing to lose by taking one risk. But let's rewind a moment. The Bluecoats were founded in 1972, the same year as DCI itself, by Canton businessman Art Druckenbrod and Canton police officers Babe Stern and Ralph McCauley, named in tribute to the retired police officers of Canton. They made their competitive debut in 1974. They placed 32 out of 37 at the U.S. Open A preliminaries in Marion, Ohio. Then, financial struggles hit the organization. Multiple times, they were forced to go inactive in 1979 and again in 1983. However, in 1987, the Bluecoats became the first corps in Ohio to make the DCI World Championship Finals, finishing 11th place with a famously expanded line of 15 snare drummers. And they established their signature style, programming fan-friendly music with big visual effects, including what became the biggest snare line cross-sticking moment in drum corps history, 20 snares bringing down the house. The organization failed to make finals only once between 1987 and the present day. And they made history in 2006 as the first new corps to enter the top 4 at DCI finals since Star of Indiana did in 1990. In 2010, they took home the bronze medal with Metropolis, The Future Is Now, scoring 96.4, the highest score at that point in the corps' history. But what happened next really tells the story. The 2014 production centered around one simple concept, captured in a single word that also functions as a verb: tilt, meaning to cause to lean, incline, slope, or slant. Throughout the show, everything tilted. The massive orange tarp and props physically tilted on the field itself. The horn players tilted their instruments at unusual angles. The guard members tilted their bodies and equipment, and even the concept of what drum corps could be tilted away from traditional expectations. The musical selections came from young American composers who viewed the world from a different angle. An experimental composer, Tyron Dye Braxton, born in 1978, whose work had been performed by the Kronos Quartet, Philip Glass, and the LA Philharmonic. Taiwanese-American pianist and singer-songwriter Vienna Tang, also born in 1978. And Andy Akiho, whose mold-breaking compositions created true excitement for the new. The show opened with marimbas playing a vertigo-inducing run, introducing tilts and curves in every formation. The intermediate sections used dissonance in the chords combined with interesting sectional and individual parts to enhance the show further, ending with the corps' famous signature as they tilted their bodies in sync with a chord shift. The drum break utilized props and choreography to take things to the next level, featuring quads teetering on ramps and snares being rocked forward and backwards by guard members, ending with the entire battery lining up on the front of the orange tarp sideline with an energetic last hit before settling down for the ballad. Vienna Tang's Hymn of the Axiom serves as the ballad. Starting soft, gaining more and more momentum before bursting into a beautiful chord. It remains one of the most beloved ballad pieces in any show. Oh, this ballad gets me every time. The closer featured that famous pitch bend at the end, where electronics literally bent the pitch of the entire ensemble, a moment that became both celebrated and slightly controversial, with some traditionalists arguing that electronics were a crutch, while others recognizing them as an amplification of the hard work put in. What makes Tilt transcend the era is how it fundamentally changed the conversation about what belonged in drumcore. Before 2014, props were often seen as gimmicky additions, something you had when your drill wasn't sophisticated enough to carry the show on its own. And electronics were controversial at best, viewed by many as antithetical to the live performance nature of the activity. Tilt said no. These tools aren't crutches or gimmicks. They're legitimate artistic choices and can enhance storytelling and create moments impossible to achieve through traditional means alone. After Tilt, almost every single DCI finalist began incorporating similar elements into their shows. Not because they were copying the Bluecoats, but because Bluecoats had proved that these tools could be used with artistic integrity at the championship level. This show became a permission structure for innovation across the entire activity. The competitive fire in Tilt wasn't about aggression or confrontation, it was about conviction. The belief that their vision of what drumcore could be was valid and valuable, even if it challenged conventions. At finals, they delivered what executive director David Glasgow called, quote, the performance of the year, end quote, finishing the season with their highest placement ever and their highest score ever, taking home the silver medal with a score of 97.175. The crowd energy was extraordinary. With standing ovations before they even finished performing, and the ending became one of those moments that people rewatch over and over because it captures something visceral about why we love this activity. The willingness to take risks, to say, we're going to do something different and we believe in it completely. 11 years later, for an entire generation of performers and fans, Tilt was their gateway into modern drumcore, the show that made them understand what the activity had become and why the evolution was worth celebrating. The show sits at number 8 because it changed the rules of engagement for modern drumcore design, gave core permission to experiment without fear of being dismissed as gimmicky. Proved that young contemporary composers could provide material just as compelling as traditional repertoire, and demonstrated that taking creative risks could be rewarded by judges and audiences alike. The Bluecoats went into 2014 after 3 consecutive years climbing 7th, 6th, 5th, and they came out with their highest score ever, in a show that is still studied and celebrated more than a decade later. One thing was certain, they were officially knocking on the door. And they would have won the championship that year if it wasn't for... Number 7. Blue Devils, 2014. Fellini-esque. Federico Fellini was one of the most decorated and transformative film directors of the 20th century. Over 12 Academy Award nominations, 4 wins, and a Lifetime Achievement Award. Films like 8½, La Dolce Vita, Amarcord, these were more than just movies. They were fever dreams. Autobiographical fantasies, circus acts disguised as cinema. Fellini's world blurred the lines between memory and desire, between reality and imagination. His work was dense, it was referential, joyful, and it needed a performing ensemble that could hold the weight while making it feel effortless. That's why the Blue Devils chose this subject matter. Not an easy concept, not a radio-friendly hook. One of the more complex figures in the history of world cinema. That ambition alone should tell you something about how this corps approached their craft.
Performing their 2014 program, Fellini-esque, Drum Corps International is proud to present the Blue Devils!
The Blue Devils 2014 show, Fellini-esque, was structured in 3 movements, each a facet of Fellini's creative identity, each drawing from a different musical palette, each requiring something different from the performers. Fellini's Religion opens with that iconic brass feature. Nino Rota's theme of La Strada cascades in early. The ballad arrives before the 4-minute mark, defying conventional show structure. Fellini's Circus. Rota's The Clowns meets Gordon Goodwin's Circo Campagna. Tambourines as weapons, zany percussion features. Every section gets a turn in the spotlight. Pure theatrical joy. And Fellini's Fantasy, The Final Push. Mari Yetsen enters. Danny Elfman's Old Toys frames it all. The stadium knows something historic is about to happen. Yes, indeed, the opening moment. 30-some trumpet players trading staccato triplets in the upper registers. That's how the Blue Devils said hello to the 2014 DCI season. No ramp-up, no warm-up act, just ice-cold, brilliant execution from the first measure. What follows is 11 minutes that this activity has never quite recovered from. Fellini-esque was an act of supreme construction. Everything was deliberate, everything interconnected, every musical quote earning its place in the narrative architecture. It was masterful brass writing, visual storytelling, and musical drama, and it synthesized it with a level of thematic sophistication that the activity hadn't really quite seen at this scale. The early ballad placement is a perfect example. Conventional wisdom said that you earned the ballad, you built towards it. The Blue Devils said, what if the emotional core arrived before you expected it? The way memory works in a Fellini film. That choice was simultaneously classical and radical. It felt like something from a different era, and it belonged to all of them at once. There is something uniquely joyful about this show, genuinely, in a way that is synchronized with the spirit of its subject. Fellini made his films that celebrated the absurdity of being alive. He found transcendence in the circus. When the color guards are spinning the tambourines during Act 2, when the corps launches into the clowns, when the percussion section finds that driving middle show groove, you're not watching a corps, you're watching 150 people doing exactly what they love at the highest possible level. Executive Director David Gibbs said it plainly, quote, "The most important thing is that these kids set out to perform and be the best Blue Devil they can be," end quote. It's all about continuing the legacy. You can hear it, you could see it. These kids weren't grinding towards a finish line, they were a core in full bloom. And that connected with audiences and judges. 7 out of 11 judges gave the Blue Devils a perfect score in their respective caption. Perfect scores in both general effect captions and all 3 visual captions. That doesn't happen by technique alone. That happens when the technique and spirit become indistinguishable from one another. Indeed, the final score, 99.650. That is a number that still requires a beat of silence when you say it. It is the all-time record through to this day. It's about as close to mathematical perfection as you could possibly attain. It towered over its competition, and it put a pretty significant gap on the prior highest score, which was 99.15. Fellini-esque was operating in a scoring stratum that the rest of the activity has not revisited. This show is a monument, with cultural staying power on the concept alone. Fellini's reputation has only grown since his death. Fellini-esque is an adjective that has entered the common usage. It's dreamlike, indulgent, autobiographical, heightened, theatrical. The Blue Devils weren't just paying homage to an artist, they were building a show around the word, a concept, an aesthetic, and they made that aesthetic march. Whatever Scott Chandler and the design team imagined when they chose Fellini as the subject, the score suggests they found it. The performance suggests that the members felt it, and the fact that we're still talking about it, still debating, still going back and watching, suggests something that a number on a scoring sheet can't fully capture. Great shows don't just win, they change what you think is possible. Fellini-esque walked into Indianapolis and showed the marching arts community that a drum corps show could be as emotionally layered and aesthetically sophisticated, as genuinely cinematic as anything happening in a theater or concert hall. It transcended its era, it embodied the winning spirit, and it is absolutely, unambiguously timeless.
Ladies and gentlemen, under the direction of David Gibbs, the Blue Devils.